Luan Davis, the captain of my high school basketball team, and the biggest asshole on campus is a vampire? Because of his illness, Victor was always in an anemic state. He could do some physical activity, but always yearned to do more. He had the spirit of a star athlete, but a body that couldn't meet the challenge. In his later teen years, before he left for college, he had a friend and physical trainer who helped him do some moderate exercise and get some experience playing sports. Victor would play basketball alone, not bothering anybody. But without fail, Luan Davis would always be there to harass him. His words echoed in Victor's head. "This is pathetic. Why is a loser like you striving for something so useless? You should stay in a hospital bed." On more than one occasion, Luan had shoulder-checked Victor or knocked him to the ground just to make his point. It was never enough to cause real damage, but just enough to constantly belittle him. Victor never cried or broke down. He was physically limited, but refused to show weakness. He had tried to report Luan in high school and then again in college, but it never worked. Eventually, Victor had given up practicing sports and instead waited for an opportunity to get revenge. Unfortunately, that opportunity never came. It was as if Luan Davis had some kind of guardian angel or demon. Looking at Luan now, it all made sense. He was a vampire this whole time. He must have had the support of a noble vampire. That's how he avoided any consequences in life. Victor remembered that when Luan was just a boy, he also suffered from a disease that made his muscles weak. But in high school, he made a full recovery and no one ever seemed to bring up his past. Victor himself had forgotten about it until this moment. There must have been some kind of wide charm effect by his noble vampire. Victor felt a feeling of validation wash over him. Things are different now. We're finally on even footing. He saw the basketball soaring towards him and effortlessly caught it with one hand. Someone on the team yelled out, "Hey you! Throw the ball over here!" Victor cracked his neck and casually dribbled it down the court. He hurled the ball through the air with power and perfect form. It traveled across the court and landed directly in the basket. Everyone looked at him in disbelief. Onlookers started cheering. "Whoa, how the hell did that guy do that?" His heightened senses allowed him to calculate the distance and exact amount of force he needed to get a basket. This feels good. "Victor, is that you?" He heard a familiar voice and turned back to see Luan with his mouth wide open. Victor steeled himself. "Hey Luan, long time no see." The other players crowded around the two of them. Luan shook his head. "Is that skinny Victor? What happened?" Victor flashed a smile and calmly approached. Well. As he got closer, the other players moved out of the way. They felt an invisible pressure rising. Victor stopped inches from Luan's face. Luan was still taller than him, but no longer was Victor afraid. They stared each other down, Luan with a cocky smile plastered on his face. "What does weak little Victor Walker think he's about to do? My friend, you have no idea who you're dealing with." Victor gently placed his hand on Luan's shoulder. "I'm not your friend." With a flick of his wrist, he brought Luan down to his knees. Luan scowled in pain. "What the hell?" Victor crouched down to his level. "You see, Luan, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." Luan struggled to get off the floor, but Victor just shoved him back down. Victor's fangs began to protrude from his mouth as an unhinged smile grew on his face. "You had fun, right? Treating me like crap, hating me, saying I was useless. It was fun, right? I bet it was. After all, you always had a smile while doing it." Victor grabbed Luan's shoulder and squeezed tight. He felt the bones crack as the bully shrieked in pain. Luan looked up at Victor's fangs and bloodshot eyes, and suddenly understood what was going on. He growled in anger. But, you must be just a newborn." Luan scrambled to his feet, only to have Victor knock his legs out from under him. I didn't say you could get up. Luan stared at Victor, terror apparent in his eyes. One of his teammates jogged over concerned. Luan, is everything okay over here? Luan clenched his jaw. Yes, we're just talking. Victor released his grip. His fangs receded and his expression flickered back to normal. I got a bit carried away there. Even with the charm, there's too many witnesses to take care of this now. Victor shot to his feet and grabbed the basketball lying on the ground. Let's settle this the old-fashioned way. After all, we're not barbarians, right? Victor clocked Luan's shoulder and saw that it was already completely healed, as expected with vampire regeneration. He chucked the ball over to him. It soared through the air at incredible speed. Luan caught the ball and the force sent him skidding back across the court. Victor laughed. You and me, first to 21. Got it? Luan nodded. Okay, you're on. A look of arrogance returned to Luan's face. The onlookers cleared the court to give the two men space. By now, a large crowd had gathered, watching intently. A woman with vibrant red hair cut through the throng and looked on inquisitively. She had green eyes, pale skin, and a voluptuous body hidden under a baggy red sweatshirt. She tapped a friend's shoulder. Hey, what's going on here? Her friend turned back. Oh, hey, Ruby. Apparently Luan is going to play one-on-one with this new kid. They almost came to blows a minute ago. Seems like they've got some sort of history. Ruby's eyes narrowed. She muttered under her breath. What an idiot. Her friend glanced back at her. What are you doing here anyway? Shouldn't you be in med school on the other side of campus? Ruby stammered. Oh, I heard a commotion and I came to see what was going on. Her friend was confused. You heard a commotion from across campus? Ruby ignored her and scurried up into the bleachers. She took a seat and studied Victor's face on the court. She heard a man's voice behind her. Miss Ruby, it's a surprise to see you here. She looked back to see a tall, middle-aged blonde man with green eyes and an aristocratic arrogance. She hid her disdain for the man and forced a smile. She pointed down at the court to Victor and Luan playing basketball with inhuman force and power. A small crack splintered across the court beneath them. The blonde man shook his head. My twit of a servant is always causing trouble. Ruby agreed. This is a bad look. The man nodded. Whose newborn opposes Luan? That's the new husband of the princess of the Snow Clan. Rage flashed across the man's face. The seat beneath him began to quake, and then all at once he calmed himself. That can't be right. A plebeian with the princess of Clan Snow. Has hell frozen over? Ruby just shrugged. Cornelio, I hope you punish your subordinate after this event. You know how dangerous attracting this kind of attention is. Cornelio nodded. Yes, of course. He will be punished, as well as Violet's new plebeian husband. Ruby looked out at the two vampires engaged in a violent game of basketball. Cornelius snarled. By the way, what's that little bastard's name? Ruby looked into the man's evil eyes. Victor. Victor was engaged in a violent basketball match with his old tormentor, Luan. He felt a strange energy in the bleachers and shot a glance in the crowd. He locked eyes with the woman he had seen before with the vibrant red hair. It was Ruby, a woman he didn't recognize, but who knew exactly who he was. He was distracted by her eyes and paid with a body check. Damn it! Luan charged in for the ball, but Victor slipped out of the way with incredible speed. Luan scowled. Don't use your gifts in front of the mortal. Victor growled and dribbled down the court. Luan charged after him, and soon they were locked in a stalemate. Victor was quick, but so was Luan. He couldn't get a shot off, and Luan couldn't steal the ball. And then in one swift motion, Victor pump-faked and blew by his opponent, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Luan barreled down the court, gaining on Victor. Victor felt him closing in. Fuck it, I'm going for it. Everyone stared in shock as Victor launched himself into the air from half court, rocketing toward the basket and tomahawking the ball down with an earthquake of a slam dunk. The crowd went crazy, hollering at the incredible sight. "That was amazing! How is that possible? He's a star!" Victor hung on the rim, enjoying the adulation. Finally, he let go and landed hard on the ground, clocking the hateful expression on Luan's face. Victor grinned wide. "What's wrong?" Luan snarled. "Big deal. Any of us can do that." Victor laughed. "Oh yeah? Prove it." Luan beckoned him forward. "Bring it on." Ruby and Cornelia watched from the stands. Cornelia was disgusted. "What a disgrace, using his gifts in public." Ruby shook her head. "He's not using his gifts." "Huh?" She turned back. "If he was using his gifts, the basketball court, the basketball hoop, and everything else would be destroyed. He's just using his natural ability. His vampiric endurance is offsetting his anemia, sure, but that just brings him to a normal human baseline." Cornelius snorted in disdain. "All newborn vampires can do that. He's no big deal." Ruby scoffed. "Oh, can you tell me which newborn vampires can do this? I'm curious." Cornelius growled and turned his attention back to the game. Ruby muttered under her breath, "That's why female vampires hate you. Your ego is the size of the world, but it's also very fragile." Cornelius snapped toward her. "What was that? What did you say?" Ruby feigned innocence. "Nothing." Cornelius stared at her with a nasty scowl. Back on the court, Luan and Victor were locked in another stalemate, countering all of each other's moves. Luan was pissed. "What about the agreement not to use your gifts?" Victor was defiant. "I'm not using my gifts, asshole. I don't need them to take down a punk like you." Luan's face twisted in anger. "We'll see if you don't need to use your powers." Luan lunged forward and snatched the ball from Victor's grip. He took off down the court as the crowd went wild. Victor raced after him, refusing any distance to set up a shot. Luan swung back and tried to knock Victor off balance with his vampire strength, but Victor stayed firm and absorbed the blow. "Is that all you got?" Victor and Luan's bodies collided in a battle of raw strength. The force cracked one of Luan's ribs. Luan grimaced as his rib began to regenerate. "What the hell are you made of?" Victor grinned. "What's wrong? Gonna cry about it?" Luan broke away, slipped Victor's grip, and attempted a Hail Mary half-court shot. Victor and the entire crowd watched in momentary silence as the ball arced through the sky. The ball slammed into the rim and bounced off. Victor pumped his fist. "Hell yeah!" They both charged for the rebound, but Victor was quicker. Luan got in his face, but Victor wasn't shaken. "You know what, Luan? I'm tired of running." Luan cocked his head. "What does that mean?" Victor suddenly pivoted out of the way and hurled the ball at full strength across the entire length of the court. The crowd gasped in shock as the orange sphere hurtled through the air and rocketed into the hoop in one clean swish. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. They had never seen such a wild game before. "This man is insane! Is he really human? How did he do that?" Victor played to the adoring crowd as Luan stomped around throwing a temper tantrum. "Who does this newborn think he is? He comes to my territory and challenges me. You're trash, Victor!" Victor mimed a tear trickling down his face. He was fully enjoying humiliating his former bully. Luan twitched in rage and came tromping toward him. He swung his arm like a blade and knocked the ball from Victor's hands. "That's it. No more holding back." The energy in the gym suddenly shifted as Luan tapped into his full vampiric abilities, but Victor wasn't scared. "What happened to the agreement not to use powers?" Luan growled. "You've been using your powers from the start. I'm just making us even." Victor shook his head. "It looks like your brain is smaller than a dog. Actually, saying you have a dog's brain is an insult to dogs. At least they follow commands." Luan dribbled the ball with violent fervor. The impact of each bounce sent small shock waves rippling across the court. Victor glanced at the stands and could feel the radiating energy of the tall blonde man sitting watching Luan. That must be the noble vampire that's his master. Victor had yet another tool to use against the flustered Luan. He caught his stare. Oh, Luan. Poor Luan. Luan snarled. What? Victor pointed to the stands. I don't think Daddy is very happy with you. Luan followed Victor's finger in frozen fear. He saw Cornelia watching him with pure anger. He didn't need to say a word. Luan immediately cowered. Victor chuckled. Looks like the dog found its owner. Luan began to sweat and panic. Victor wagged his finger. Now, are you going to obey your owner, or are you going to continue? Decide. How good a dog are you? Luan trembled with pure rage, but had no choice but to concede. You son of a bitch. Victor grinned. Well? Luan lowered his head, destroyed. It's over. I give up. The crowd watched in shocked silence at the captain of the basketball team quit at the hands of some unknown. They erupted in cheers for the mysterious basketball Victor. Victor. He felt a pang of sympathy for the broken vampire, but it was quickly replaced by a feeling of vindication. I humiliated Luan in front of the whole school, and I found out who his master is. I think that's enough wins for one day. As Victor pushed through the crowd, he could hear women around him talking and gawking. My God, look at his body. He is so hot. Does he have a girlfriend? He was flattered, but ignored them. Sorry, ladies, I'm a married man. He glanced back into the stands and again saw Ruby. They locked eyes. He had no idea who she was, but yet she felt so familiar. He saw a look of stark concern on her face. What the hell is going on here? As Victor walked off the court, he had no idea what kind of evil was coming for him, and he had no idea that he had just been staring into the eyes of his other wife. Victor was too keyed up from his heated basketball game with Luan to think much of the strange woman with vibrant red hair who had been staring at him from the bleachers. As far as he was aware, he had never met her. He certainly had no idea that he was looking into the piercing green eyes of his wife, Ruby. Instead, he was focused on the tall blonde man behind her, Corneliu Funar, the noble vampire, Luan's master. Why did that vampire look at me with such rage? It was just one basketball game where I humiliated his slave. Victor shook his head. Noble vampires are beings with egos the size of the world. Before returning home, Victor waited for Corneliu in a shadowy stretch against the wall of the quad. He knew vampires couldn't walk in the sunlight and figured he would leave the building sooner or later. Victor waited for a few minutes, but when he realized he wasn't going to come, he lost interest. Before leaving, he used his vampire vision to scan his surroundings. No vampires, only humans for several miles. With a sigh, he departed the shadows and left campus. Meanwhile, in his office, Corneliu yelled angrily at Luan as he slammed his hand on his desk. You fool! What were you thinking showing off in front of the entire school? Because of his supernatural strength, the desk had an imprint of his hand in the wood. Corneliu was currently working as the college's basketball coach. Despite his title, he didn't teach the students anything. He merely managed the team, a figurehead at best. In reality, he did nothing for the school. He used his vampiric charm to stay in this post. It was an attempt to win the heart of Ruby, one of the 4 flowers of the vampire world. At this point, Luan was frightened. He may have acted like a big man on campus, but he knew that in front of the vampire who gave him his gifts, he was nothing more than a slave. Luan knew that noble vampires were arrogant beings. They thought the world revolved around them, but their egos were as fragile as glass. At least in Luan's experience. But he had only been in contact with a single noble vampire since he became a newborn. Luan looked up at his master, Corneliu, heir of House Bernard. He still remembered the day he was in a hospital bed, and the vampire had shown up to help him. He felt he was chosen to be the prince's knight, but the reality was much more difficult than he imagined. This prince was nothing more than a spoiled vampire, but since he helped him out of that deplorable condition, Luan was eternally grateful, literally. Corneliu fumed. You have nothing to say for yourself? Luan remained silent. He knew that no matter what he said, he would suffer the punishment. When you endure incessant torture for so long, you get used to it. As long as his master wasn't touching his family, a little torture was nothing to him. Corneliu chewed his fingernails as he racked his brain. This was a habit he had since he was a child. Finally, he perked up and looked down at Luan. I'll save your punishment for later. But first, we must kill that newborn. Corneliu's logic was simple. Get rid of the showboating Victor and he would be free to court Violet. Luan opened his eyes wide. Why? Why should we kill him? Despite being a vampire for over a year, Luan still hadn't killed a soul. He always just drank his master's blood. Corneliu screamed with a menacing face. Are you questioning me? If I say do something, you do it. Don't forget your position here. Luan stammered. Yes, master. Corneliu rattled with irritation at the thought of a newborn having stolen one of the flowers of the vampire world. Violet had always been an object of desire for all young noble vampires. She was beautiful and connected to one of the rarest bloodlines in the vampire world. He simply couldn't accept that a humble newborn had decided to steal his most prized possession. Corneliu grumbled to himself. Just wait, you little slave. I'm going to turn you into dog food. Victor arrived home to see that Violet had made a huge basement in his house. His old run-of-the-mill cellar now looked like a cave with lots of tunnels and rooms. It was like an underground command center straight out of a movie. How did she do it so fast? Victor approached her. Is it safe to make a basement this size? Violet didn't understand his confusion. Of course, why not? She was wearing casual clothes this time. A simple white sweatshirt, black denim shorts, and purple sneakers with a swoosh. I'm a little surprised by the outfit she picked out. I thought she had an all-black wardrobe of cosplay outfits. Well, I'm not complaining. She looks hot no matter what she wears. Seeing my affectionate gaze, she smiled back. He challenged her timidly. I mean, I'm no scientist, but won't the house collapse over a hole this size? Oh, don't worry about it. Violet clapped her hands lightly, and soon Victor felt someone approaching. He used his vampire vision to see that the person was human. The characteristics of a vampire were very easy to identify, but Victor always used his vampire vision to make sure. After all, some humans could look like vampires if they were ill or had genetic conditions like his. I can see this woman's heart glowing as if inviting me to feed on her. But the blue aura that surrounds her and her heart that seems to glow brighter than usual tells me she's different. The woman had short black hair with golden eyes. She wore a casual outfit consisting of a white shirt with a beach photo stamped on her chest, simple khaki shorts, and a basic pair of sandals. She looked a little shorter than Kaguya. Violet wrapped her arms around Victor, possessively. Darling, meet June. And June, meet my husband, Victor. June flashed a peace sign with their fingers. Yo, can you stop looking at me with those red eyes? I'm feeling a little threatened. Victor closed his eyes for a moment, and his vision returned to normal. Sorry about that. It's just a bad habit of mine. He studied her. She smiled. Don't worry, it's all love. She spun to face Violet. Lady Violet, I'm still waiting on my payment. You can deposit it in my account with the same amount as always. Violet rolled her eyes. I know, $1 million, right? June nodded. Yes, indeed. Victor almost choked at that dollar amount. Just how much money does my wife have? June made a few gestures with her hands, and soon the basement began to transform. Black tiles covered the floor, and several wooden coffins appeared in the bedrooms. The walls turned a pale white color, and bricks popped out of thin air. Like a magic trick, the basement that once looked like a cave now looked like the interior of a mansion. Victor scratched his head. To my knowledge, there's only one group of beings that could do what this woman just did. You're a witch. June's satisfied smirk quickly turned into a happy, joyful smile. Violet spoke with elegance. Indeed, June is a witch I hired when I arrived in the U.S. As you can see, she has many useful and unique skills. If you have a requirement that cannot be legally obtained, you can ask June. She'll charge you an arm and a leg, but since you're my husband, she should give you a discount, right? Of course, Lady Violet. Victor was amazed. It must be helpful to have a witch on retainer who can literally create anything with a stroke of her hand. It seems like Violet has a long history with June. She must plan to keep her around for a while. Victor tried to ask Violet why she created this underground basement. Why did you... But then he remembered all the servants she had. Never mind. Victor scanned the massive space around him. Of course, this is all very useful for Violet and her staff, but how the fuck am I going to explain this to my parents? I need to keep it hidden from them. They might be dense enough to ignore my physical change, but oblivious enough to easily accept Violet as my wife. But this is another level of bullshit I would have to invent to convince my parents. Suddenly remembering the money-making thievery scheme he hatched earlier, Victor looked at June. Miss... She smiled. Just call me June. June, can you help me get a fake ID, a fake bank account, and a fake social security number? June gave him a confused look that was quickly replaced with a professional smile. Is that all? Easy. June picked up a phone and punched in some numbers. She had a quick whispered conversation with someone on the other end. She glanced up at Victor. What name do you want to use? How about, James Smith? June nodded and continued her phone call. Victor exhaled. That was easy. He began stroking Violet's long white mane. He felt her breathing grow erratic. She leered at him with glowing red eyes. She looked like she was going to jump on him at any moment. For a moment, he looked at his hand. Do I have the hand of a god? Why is she reacting like this just by me stroking her head? June hung up the phone and summoned 3 documents out of thin air. The first was a fake social security card. The second was a passport. And the third was a bank statement from a tax-free country. Victor was genuinely surprised. You are very efficient. Are all witches like this? June spoke as her golden eyes sparkled. The answer to that question is going to cost you. Do you really want to know? Victor shook his head. Forget it. June clicked her tongue. Too bad. Violet suddenly looked at June with intense blood-red eyes. Leave. Her fangs began to protrude. June felt a shiver run down her spine. Right, I just remembered that I had to feed my cat in Hawaii. Take care, Lord and Husband. Soon I will be back to collect my money for my services. Aloha! June made a few gestures with her hand. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared on the ground. She stepped inside and disappeared. Victor turned to lock eyes with his impassioned wife and felt a sudden explosion of bloodlust inside of him. He licked his lips. I want her. I want her blood. Victor unclasped the top buttons of her shirt and bared her fangs. Come get me, darling. Let's have some fun.